Ambassador Chun stood in the center of the Galactic Council chambers, her face calm and expressionless. Around her, dozens of alien species chatted among themselves, barely paying attention to the human woman at the podium. This was normal. Humans were never important enough to demand full attention. The United Earth government hereby withdraws from the Galactic Council, Chun announced clearly. All human personnel will return home within 60 cycles. All embassies will close. All contracts will be terminated according to legal protocols. A few council members glanced up briefly. The Rixian counselor, a tall being with purple skin and 4 arms, waved one hand dismissively. Acknowledged, he said, already looking back at his datapad. The Quellan representative didn't even look up from her holographic display. This was exactly what Chun expected. Humans had been part of the council for almost 200 years, but they were always treated as the junior species. The weak ones. The ones who did the boring work nobody else wanted. Most aliens saw them as slightly clever animals, who were useful for manual labor and little else. Chun bowed slightly and left the chamber. No one called her back. No one asked why. No one seemed to care at all. But if they had been paying attention, they would have noticed something strange. The human withdrawal was happening with military precision. On stations across the galaxy, human workers quietly packed their belongings. Human engineers copied their work files and then carefully deleted every trace from company servers. Human technicians finished their shifts, handed over their tools, and disappeared. On the massive trade station Nexus 7, the human maintenance crew spent their last week training replacements. They showed the Tholian engineers how to run the waste recycling systems, how to monitor the air filtration, how to check the power distribution nodes. The Tholians nodded confidently. It all seemed simple enough. At the outer reach mining colonies, human safety officers gave thick binders of protocols to their replacements. These procedures were developed over 40 years, one officer explained to a bored Rixian supervisor. Each species has different risk perception, so we had to— Yes, the Rixian interrupted. We'll review it. You can go now. In the Council's central communication hub, human linguists handed over translation databases to the new AI systems. The AI should handle most of it, one linguist told her Quellan replacement. But sometimes context matters more than literal meaning. If you need help, we won't, the Quellan said coldly. Machine translation is more accurate than biological guesswork anyway. Across the galaxy, the same scene repeated thousands of times. Humans tried to explain. Aliens dismissed them. It was the way things had always been. 58 cycles after Chun's announcement, the last human transport ships gathered at the edge of council space. Captain Maria Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the transport vessel homeward, looking at the scanner display. Behind her ship, 200 other vessels waited in formation. Every human in council space was going home. All ships report ready, her first officer said quietly. Rodriguez nodded. Take us out. The fleet turned away from council space and engaged their faster-than-light drives. Within moments, they were gone. Back in council space, life continued normally. The Rixian counselor was having lunch with several colleagues when someone mentioned the human departure. Good riddance, he laughed, sipping his drink. We finally got rid of those chattering primates. They talked too much and accomplished too little. The others laughed along with him. At a nearby table, a Ven observer sat alone, slowly eating her meal. The Ven were known for their patience and their long-term thinking. She had been watching the human withdrawal carefully, and something about it bothered her. Humans didn't leave angry. They didn't make threats or demands. They didn't sabotage anything or cause problems. They simply erased themselves. Completely and thoroughly, the Ven observer pulled up her datapad and began making notes. She had a feeling this wasn't over. She began compiling a list of every position humans had held, every system they had maintained, every job they had done. The list grew longer and longer on Nexus 7 station. The Tholian engineers started their first shift without human supervision. The waste recycling system hummed along normally. The air filtration worked fine. The power distribution was stable. Everything seemed perfect. See? One Tholian said to another. The humans made it seem complicated, but it's actually quite simple. His colleague agreed. They both felt proud of themselves for managing so easily. Neither of them noticed the small yellow warning light that flickered on in a sub-basement control room. It was just one light among thousands. The system that should have flagged it for immediate attention didn't trigger an alarm. That system had been designed by a human engineer 20 years ago, and nobody else quite understood how it prioritized alerts. The warning light continued blinking. Ignored and alone in the darkness, on mining station Kepler 4, the new Rixian safety supervisor threw the human protocol binders into storage. 40 years of bureaucratic nonsense, he muttered. We'll do things the efficient way now. He implemented a new one-size-fits-all safety system based on Rixian standards. It looked good on paper. The mining quotas would definitely increase. What he didn't know was that the human protocols accounted for the fact that Rixians had faster reflexes than most species, while Quellans had slower reaction times but better spatial awareness. And Ven workers needed different break schedules because of their biology. The old system had been a complicated mess of different rules for different species, all carefully balanced over decades. The new simple system worked great for Rixians. For everyone else, it was dangerous. At the Council Communication Hub, the new AI translation system processed its first major diplomatic exchange between the Tholian Empire and the Quellan Unity. The translation was technically perfect. Every word was accurate, but the AI didn't know that when a Tholian said, "We insist on reconsidering the terms," it was actually a polite way of saying, "We refuse." Completely. The human linguists would have known. They would have added a note, suggested alternative phrasing, prevented misunderstanding. The AI simply translated the words exactly as spoken. The Quellan representative read the message and smiled, thinking the Tholians were open to negotiation. She sent back a response suggesting minor changes. The Tholians, reading this as an insult after their clear refusal, sent an angry response. The first seeds of a diplomatic disaster were planted, and across the galaxy, in thousands of systems and stations and offices, little problems began to emerge. Nothing major yet, just small glitches, tiny errors, minor inefficiencies. The Ven Observer added them all to her growing report. A report that nobody wanted to read, 16 cycles after the humans left. The first real problem hit Nexus 7 station. Chief Engineer Vorthan was having his morning meal when his communicator started screaming with emergency alerts. He rushed to the control center to find chaos. Waste recycling had completely failed in Sector 12. Sewage was backing up into residential areas. The smell was unbelievable. What happened? Vorthan demanded. A young Tholian technician looked up from his console, his face confused. I don't know, sir. The system just crashed. We tried to restart it, but nothing works. Vorthan pulled up the diagnostic screens. What he saw made no sense. The main recycling system was fine, but there was some kind of secondary program that had been running in the background, and it had suddenly stopped. Without it, the main system didn't know how to process waste from different species. What is this program? Vorthan asked. The technician checked the logs. It says, it was installed by Human Maintenance Team 7 41 years ago. It's listed as a temporary patch. A temporary patch that ran for 41 years? Vorthan shook his head. Find the documentation. They searched for hours. There was no documentation. Or rather, there was a reference to a file that should have been in the central database, but the file was gone. The humans had taken it with them. Vorthan called in experts from across the station. It took them 3 weeks to understand what the humans had built. The temporary patch wasn't simple at all. It was an incredibly complex system that monitored waste from 70 different species, each with different biology, and routed it through the recyclers in exactly the right sequence. When they finally managed to bypass it and build a new system, it worked. But the recycling efficiency dropped by 30%. Processing took longer. Energy costs went up, and there was nothing they could do about it. How did the humans figure this out? One engineer wondered aloud. Nobody had an answer. The same cycle, similar problems started appearing elsewhere. On Industrial Station Forge 9, production quotas were suddenly impossible to meet. The foreman yelled at workers, accusing them of being lazy. But the workers insisted they were doing the same amount of work as always. Finally, someone looked at the work schedules. They had been created by a human efficiency consultant named Dr. James Park, who had spent 15 years studying how different species work together. He had designed shift rotations that kept species with incompatible atmospheres from overlapping. He had scheduled breaks at times that matched each species' biological rhythms. He had organized workflows so that fast workers weren't waiting on slow workers, and careful workers weren't rushed by impatient ones. The new schedulers had thrown all that out and created a simple, logical system based on standard time divisions. On paper, it was more efficient. In reality, it was a disaster. Rixian workers who needed short, frequent breaks were now scheduled for long shifts. Quellan workers who thought carefully before acting were now being rushed by Tholian supervisors who valued speed. Then workers who preferred consistent routines found their schedules changing weekly. Productivity didn't just drop. In some areas, it collapsed completely. Workers from different species started fighting. Some quit in frustration. The station manager begged for help from the council, but similar problems were being reported across the galaxy. There weren't enough consultants to fix everything. Meanwhile, the council's communication network was developing annoying problems. Messages arrived late. Video calls dropped randomly. Data transfers failed halfway through. The prestigious Tholian Tech Guild was brought in to investigate. What they found embarrassed them. The quantum relay protocols that managed communication across the entire galaxy contained 17,000 lines of human code. The code was buried deep in the system and it looked redundant. Just unnecessary complexity. Why would they write it like this? One Tholian engineer complained. It's so inefficient. They decided to clean it up. They removed the human code and replaced it with sleek, elegant Tholian algorithms. The new system was beautiful. It was also 20% slower. After weeks of testing, they finally understood. The human code wasn't handling the actual data transmission. It was managing packet prioritization across hundreds of incompatible alien systems. Tholian computers processed information one way. Quellan systems used completely different logic. Rixian networks had their own architecture. Human code had been the translator between all of them, making everything work together smoothly. The Tholian engineers tried to recreate it. They failed. The problem wasn't technical skill. It was understanding. To write that code, you needed to deeply understand how each species thought, how their computers worked, how their logic systems operated. The humans had apparently spent decades learning all of this. The Tholians eventually gave up and left the network running slower. At least it works, they reported to the council, but it didn't just work slower. The reduced efficiency created bottlenecks. Important messages were delayed. Emergency communications arrived late. The council's ability to coordinate across the galaxy was weakening. By Cycle 40, the council was holding daily emergency meetings. Each meeting addressed a new crisis. A hospital network crash here. A trade route disruption there. A diplomatic translation error causing tensions. Each problem seemed separate and unrelated. The Venn observer knew better. She had been tracking every issue, mapping every failure. She created a visualization showing how all the problems connected. The pattern was clear to her, but when she tried to show it to other council members, they dismissed it. You're seeing patterns that aren't there, a Rixian counselor told her. These are just normal technical difficulties. We're adapting to new systems. It will stabilize soon. The Venn observer didn't argue. She simply continued collecting data. Her report grew longer each day. In the council archives, there was a forgotten recording of one of Ambassador Chun's speeches from 30 years earlier. She had been requesting better working conditions for human workers on outer stations. We don't ask for much, Chun had said. We just want to be treated as equals, as partners. We've been here for 170 years. contributing to every aspect of Council society. We maintain your systems, we work in your factories, we help you communicate with each other. All we ask is respect. The Council had denied her request. Again, as they had done so many times before, nobody watched that recording now. Nobody remembered what Chun had said. They were all too busy dealing with the growing list of problems. And in distant human space, Earth ships continued their journey home, leaving the galaxy to discover just how much it had depended on the species it had never respected. By Cycle 60, the word inconvenience was no longer accurate. The Council was facing a full crisis. Dr. Selvin, a Quellan physician at Central Medical Station, arrived at work to find complete chaos. The entire galactic medical network was down. Hospitals across 3 sectors couldn't access patient files. Doctors couldn't see medical histories. Pharmacies couldn't verify prescriptions. How long until the system is back? Selvin demanded. The IT technician looked exhausted. We don't know. Maybe days. Maybe weeks. Weeks? We have patients who will die without their medical records. The technician pulled up a diagnostic screen. The problem is the interface layers. The network connects medical databases from 400 different species. Each species uses completely different medical classification systems. Tholian medical records are organized by quantum state. Rixian records use chemical composition. Our Quellan system uses mathematical probability models. Yes, I know, Selvin said impatiently. What's your point? The humans built and maintained all the translation interfaces. They were the only ones who understood all the different systems well enough to make them talk to each other. The technician gestured at the screen. We're trying to rebuild it, but we don't even know where to start. The network stayed down for 3 days. During that time, 87 patients died from preventable causes because doctors couldn't access their medical histories. Thousands more suffered complications. The incident made galactic news, and the Council faced angry protests from medical organizations across the galaxy. But the medical crisis was just the beginning. In the outer reach mining colonies, disaster struck Kepler Station. The new one-size-fits-all safety system had been in place for 2 months. It seemed to be working fine. Production was actually up slightly. Then, during a routine shift change, a decompression alarm went off in Sector 8. The Rixian workers reacted instantly with their fast reflexes and made it to the safe zones. But the Ven workers, who had slower reaction times, didn't understand the new alarm system. The old human-designed system had used different alarm patterns for different species, each designed to trigger the appropriate response for that species' psychology. The new system used one standard alarm. The Ven workers hesitated, trying to interpret it. By the time they understood the danger, it was too late. 40-3 Ven miners died in the decompression. It was the worst mining disaster in Council history. The investigation was brutal. It revealed that the human safety protocols had contained detailed psychological profiles for 70 different species. The humans had spent decades studying how each species perceived risk, how they reacted to danger, how they processed emergency information. They had created a safety system that worked with biology and psychology. Not against it, the new system had ignored all of that. It assumed that all species would react the same way to the same stimulus. That assumption had killed 43 people. The mining company executives were arrested. The Rixian supervisor who threw away the human protocols was charged with criminal negligence. But the damage was done. And across the outer reach, miners were refusing to work until proper safety systems were restored. Nobody knew how to restore them. The humans who had built them were gone. Meanwhile, diplomatic relations across the galaxy were falling apart. The AI translation system that had replaced human linguists was creating disaster after disaster. The Tholian Quellan trade dispute had escalated into a serious conflict. What had started as a simple misunderstanding had snowballed into accusations of bad faith and disrespect. Both sides were now threatening to break their alliance. The Council called an emergency mediation session. But during the session, more translation errors occurred. When the Rixian mediator tried to calm things down, his words were translated in a way that offended both parties. The then ambassador attempted to suggest a compromise, but the AI translated her carefully nuanced proposal as a vague and unhelpful statement. The mediation collapsed. The Tholian and Quellan ambassadors stormed out, both threatening war. Later, a senior council diplomat reviewed the translation logs and realized what had happened. Human linguists had always added context notes to their translations. They explained cultural nuances. They warned about potential misunderstandings. They suggested better phrasing when needed. The AI just translated words. It was technically accurate but completely missed subtext, idiom, cultural context, and diplomatic nuance. It couldn't understand that some species valued direct communication while others preferred subtle suggestion. It couldn't recognize when a statement was meant sarcastically or when silence was more meaningful than words. "Can we fix the AI?" the diplomat asked the programmers. "Fix what?" they responded. "The AI is working perfectly. It translates accurately, but it doesn't understand meaning. That's not what it was designed to do." The diplomat wanted to scream. Instead, he sent an urgent message to the council requesting that human linguists be recalled immediately. His request was denied. The council was still too proud to admit they needed humanity. By Cycle 75, the council was drowning in problems. Every sector was reporting failures. Every industry was struggling. Every diplomatic relationship was strained. The council's response was to throw resources at each problem individually. They hired more engineers to fix the technical issues. They brought in more consultants to address efficiency problems. They installed bigger computers to handle communication loads. They created new regulations to prevent safety disasters. Nothing worked. Every solution seemed to create two new problems. It was like trying to hold water in cupped hands. The faster they moved, the more slipped through their fingers. In a small office deep in the council archives, the Venn observer continued her work. Her report was now 3,000 pages long. She had documented every failure, every problem, every crisis. And she had traced them all back to their source. She finished her analysis and sat back, staring at the visualization on her screen. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. A vast network showing every point where humans had connected incompatible systems, mediated between incompatible species, and solved problems that nobody else wanted to deal with. The network was dying. Connections were breaking everywhere, and the rate of decay was accelerating. She calculated how long the council had before total systemic collapse. The number horrified her. She requested an emergency session with the full council. At first, they denied her request. She was just an observer, a note-taker. Not important enough for emergency sessions, she sent them one sentence. "We have 30 cycles before complete galactic infrastructure collapse." That got their attention. The emergency session was scheduled for the next day. The Venn observer prepared her presentation, knowing that what she was about to show them would change everything. Outside the council chambers, the galaxy continued falling apart. Systems failed. People died. Civilizations that had stood for thousands of years began to crack, and somewhere in deep space, the human fleet traveled on toward home. Unaware that the mighty Galactic Council was finally beginning to understand the catastrophic mistake they had made, the council chamber was packed. Every seat was filled. Representatives from hundreds of species waited impatiently for the emergency session to begin. They had all read the Venn Observer's warning, and they were angry. "This is ridiculous," the Rixian counselor muttered to his neighbor. 30 cycles until collapse? Impossible. She's being dramatic. But there was fear in his voice. Everyone had heard about the disasters. Everyone was dealing with problems in their own sectors. And deep down, they were all starting to wonder if maybe the situation was worse than they had admitted. The Venn observer stepped up to the central podium. Her name was Thex, and she had been quietly watching the council for almost 200 years. Nobody had paid much attention to her. Observers were meant to watch, not speak. Today she would speak. And they would listen. "Honored council members," Thex began, her voice calm and clear. For the past 75 cycles, I have been documenting every system failure. Every efficiency loss, every diplomatic incident that has occurred since humanity's departure. I have tracked patterns that you have dismissed as coincidence. Today I will show you the truth. She activated her presentation. A massive holographic display appeared above the chamber, showing the entire Galactic Council space in 3 dimensions. "This is our civilization," Vex said. Then she pressed a button, and thousands of red dots appeared throughout the display. These are the positions humans held, the jobs they performed, the systems they maintained. The council members leaned forward, studying the display. The red dots seemed to be everywhere, but there was no obvious pattern. "At first glance," Vex continued, "it appears random. Humans were scattered throughout our civilization, doing various unimportant jobs. This is what we all believed." She pressed another button. Lines appeared, connecting the red dots. At first it looked like chaos, but as more lines appeared, a pattern emerged. The council chamber fell silent. The lines formed a network, a vast, intricate web that touched every part of galactic civilization. And at every junction, every connection point, every intersection of that web, there was a red dot, a human position. "This is what we failed to see," Vex said quietly. Humans were not scattered randomly. They were positioned strategically, whether intentionally or instinctively, at every interface point in our civilization. She zoomed in on one section of the display. Here, on Nexus 7, humans maintained the waste recycling system. We thought this was simple maintenance work. But look closer. The display showed multiple lines converging. The recycling system interfaces with 70 different species waste streams. Each species has unique biology, unique chemistry, unique processing requirements. Humans understood all of them. They built a system that harmonized all these incompatible requirements. She zoomed to another location. Here, on the industrial stations, humans designed work schedules. We thought they were just filling time slots. But they were actually mediating between dozens of species with incompatible work styles, different biological rhythms, conflicting social needs. They created harmony where there should have been chaos. That zoomed out again, showing the entire network. Throughout our civilization, at every point where different species needed to cooperate, where incompatible systems needed to interface, where communication broke down, there were humans. They were the translators, the mediators, the problem solvers. They were the connective tissue of our entire society. She let that sink in for a moment, then continued. Each species in this council is brilliant in their own way. Quellans excel at mathematics, Rixians at rapid manufacturing, Tholians at quantum computing, Ven at long-term planning. We are all specialists, masters of our individual domains. Vex's voice grew harder. But we cannot talk to each other. We cannot work together. Our systems are incompatible. Our thinking is incompatible. Our very biology is incompatible. For thousands of years, this limited us. We existed in separate spaces, barely touching. She gestured at the display. Then humans arrived. Humans who were not the best at any one thing. Humans who were weaker, slower, less specialized than any of us. Humans who we dismissed as primitive. But humans had one ability we all lacked. They could adapt. They could learn. They could understand multiple perspectives. They could bridge gaps. Another button press. The red dots began disappearing from the display, one by one, showing humanity's withdrawal over 60 cycles. As each dot disappeared, the connections around it began to fail. The web started breaking apart. "This is what has been happening for 75 cycles," Vex said. "Every system failure, every efficiency loss, every diplomatic disaster traces back to a broken connection in this network. We tried to replace humans with our own specialists. But specialists cannot bridge gaps to other specialties. Only generalists can do that. Only adapters. Only humans." The display now showed the network in its current state. It looked like a web after a fire, full of holes and broken strands. Parts of it were completely disconnected from the rest. "Now watch," Dex said softly. She ran a simulation forward in time. The decay accelerated. More connections broke. Entire sections of the network collapsed. Systems that had been working suddenly failed as their last connections to the rest of civilization snapped. The simulation reached 30 cycles into the future. The network was almost completely destroyed. Only isolated pockets remained, unable to communicate or cooperate with each other. "This is our future," Dex said. 30 cycles until complete systemic collapse. Perhaps less if the decay continues accelerating. But the chamber was absolutely silent. Council members stared at the shattered network in horror. The Rixian counselor who had joked about chattering primates looked like he might be sick. Finally, the Quellan senior counselor spoke. "What are our options?" Vex displayed a new chart. "I have analyzed possible solutions. Option 1, we attempt to rebuild the network ourselves. Success probability 8%. Time required, minimum 200 cycles. People who will die during the attempt, estimated 50 billion, gasps echoed through the chamber. Option 2, we accelerate development of AI systems to replace human functions. Success probability 12%. Time required, minimum 100 cycles. Estimated casualties 30 billion, more gasps. Option 3, Dex paused. We ask humanity to return. And what is the success probability of that? Asked the Tholian counselor. Unknown, Vex admitted. It depends entirely on whether humans are willing to help us after 200 years of being treated as inferior. The Rixian counselor stood up, his face ashen. How long until we can send a delegation to Earth? Vex consulted her datapad. That is another problem. The long-range navigation databases were maintained by human cartographers. They updated routes, tracked hazards, calculated safe paths through changing space conditions. After 75 cycles of neglect, our navigation data is severely degraded. How long? The Rixian demanded, to reach Earth safely? Approximately 20 cycles. Someone calculated quickly. That leaves us only 10 cycles to convince them and organize their return. That's not enough time. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some wanted to try option 1 or 2. Others insisted they had to at least try contacting Earth. A few suggested they should simply accept collapse and focus on saving what they could. Finally, the senior counselor called for order. We vote, she announced. All in favor of sending an emergency delegation to Earth. Every single hand, paw, tentacle, and appendage rose into the air. For the first time in council history, a vote was completely unanimous. Prepare the fastest ship we have, the senior counselor ordered. Select our best diplomats. Offer whatever resources we need to offer. Humanity must return. As the council scrambled to organize the delegation, Vex remained at the podium, staring at her display. She knew something the others didn't seem to realize yet. This wasn't just about systems and networks. It was about respect, about recognition, about treating people as equals instead of tools. The council was about to learn a hard lesson. You cannot demand help from people you have spent centuries disrespecting. You cannot buy back dignity once you have taken it away. Vex powered down her display and left the chamber. She hoped the delegation would succeed. But she remembered the look in Ambassador Chun's eyes during that final speech. The quiet anger. The dignified withdrawal humans had left in silence. Vex suspected they had no intention of returning the council delegation. Ship reconciliation emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of human space. The journey had taken 22 cycles, 2 cycles longer than predicted. The degraded navigation data had forced them to take slower, safer routes. Ambassador Torvin, a senior Rixian diplomat with 40 years of experience, stood on the bridge and stared at the view screen. What he saw shocked him into silence. Earth's system was transformed. The last time council ships had visited, 100 years ago, Earth had been developing but still clearly behind council technology. Now, massive orbital platforms surrounded the planet. Advanced shipyards built vessels using designs Torvin had never seen. Energy signatures suggested power generation far beyond what Council space could achieve. "How is this possible?" whispered Quellan Ambassador Nyrix, standing beside him. The communications officer looked up from her console. "Sir, we're being scanned. Their sensor technology is... I've never seen anything like it. They know everything about our ship, our weapons, our shields, our power systems. All of it. Hail them," Torvin ordered. "Request permission to speak with their government." A response came within seconds. "Earth Defense Coordinates acknowledge Council vessel. You are cleared to approach Earth Station 1. Do not deviate from transmitted flight path. Weapons must remain powered down." The tone was professional but cold. Not hostile, but certainly not friendly. The delegation ship followed the flight path exactly, not daring to test human patience. Earth Station 1 was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the largest Council station. As Reconciliation docked, Torvin noticed dozens of other ships in the hangar. Some were human designs, but others were completely unfamiliar. "Those aren't Council ships," Nyrix observed. "Who are they?" "Unknown species," the sensor officer reported. "I count vessels from at least 15 different civilizations. None in our databases." The delegation was met by a human security team and escorted through the station. Everywhere Torvin looked, he saw wonders. The technology was advanced, yes, but what struck him most was the people. Humans moved through the corridors with confidence and purpose. They were building something here. Something new. They were finally taken to a conference room where Ambassador Chun waited. She was much older now, her hair completely white, but her eyes were still sharp. She sat calmly as the Council delegation entered. "Ambassador Chun," Torvin began, trying to sound diplomatic. "Thank you for seeing us. We have traveled far to—" "I know why you're here," Chun interrupted quietly. "Your systems are failing. Your civilization is collapsing. You need help." Torvin blinked. "You know about the crisis?" "We've been monitoring Council space," Chun said. "We knew this would happen. We tried to warn you many times over many years. You never listened." Nyrix stepped forward. "We understand we made mistakes. We failed to recognize humanity's contributions. But surely you won't let billions die because of our pride?" Chun's expression didn't change. "My government sent me to hear your offer." "What are you proposing?" Torvin pulled out a datapad. "The Council is prepared to offer substantial compensation. Exclusive trade rights, territory, advanced technology shares, permanent seats on the Council with full voting rights. We can discuss any terms you—" "No," Chun said simply. Torvin stopped mid-sentence. "I'm sorry?" "No, we're not interested in any of those things." But you haven't even heard our full offer." Chun leaned forward. "Ambassador Torvin, let me explain something. For 200 years, humanity served the Council faithfully. We worked hard. We solved problems. We connected your civilization. And for 200 years, you treated us as tools. As servants. As lesser beings." She pulled up a holographic display. "I have records here of every time we requested fair treatment. Every proposal we made for better working conditions. Every suggestion we offered for improvement. All denied. All dismissed. We weren't just ignored. We were actively disrespected." The display showed image after image. Human workers in dangerous conditions. Human engineers explaining complex systems to board supervisors. Human diplomats being talked over in meetings. Centuries of small humiliations and large injustices. "We didn't leave because we were angry," Chun continued. "We left because we realized you would never see us as equals. You valued the work, but not the workers. You wanted the results, but not the relationship. So we came home and built something better." "Better?" Torvin asked. Chun stood and walked to the window. Outside, ships from different species moved in coordinated patterns. After we left Council space, we started exploring in different directions. We found other species. Younger civilizations. Some less advanced than us, some more advanced, but all willing to work together as equals. She gestured at the view. Those ships belong to our partners. The Keller, who are brilliant at genetics. The Vorn, who understand exotic physics. The Mishik, who are natural educators. And a dozen other species. We share knowledge freely. We respect each other. We build together. We've accomplished in 75 cycles what took the Council thousands of years, Chun said. Because we don't waste energy on pride and hierarchy. Everyone contributes. Everyone benefits. Everyone is valued. Torvin felt desperation rising. Then share that with us. Help us build the same thing. Chun turned back to face him. Why should we? Because people are dying. People died in your space for centuries, Chun said coldly. Human workers died in your mines, your factories, your stations. We brought you safety reports. We showed you the dangers. You ignored us because improving conditions would cost money and human lives weren't valuable enough to spend money on. She pulled up more records. 43 Ven miners died on Kepler Station. Did you know that could have been prevented? Human safety officers warned about that exact scenario 15 years ago. Their report was thrown away by a Rixian supervisor who thought he knew better. Torvin looked at the floor. He had read that report during the journey. The details were damning. Chun's voice softened slightly. I understand that most council citizens are not responsible for these decisions. But the system that created this crisis is the same system that oppressed humanity for 2 centuries. You're asking us to return and hold that system together. To once again sacrifice ourselves for people who don't respect us. We respect you now, Nyrix said quietly. We understand what we lost. You understand what you need, Chun corrected. That's not the same as respect. Respect would have meant treating us well when you didn't need us. When we were asking for basic fairness, not begging you to prevent collapse. Torvin took a deep breath. Then what do you want from us? What would it take? Chun sat back down. I don't want anything from you. I'm not interested in negotiation. But my government asked me to present you with an option, so I will. She pulled up a document. This is a proposal for what we call the Galactic Commonwealth. It's not a council. It's a cooperative alliance of equal species. No hierarchy. No superior races. Decisions are made by consensus. Technology is shared freely. Resources are distributed fairly. Everyone contributes according to their ability and receives according to their needs. Torvin read through the document quickly. What it described was revolutionary. It would completely restructure galactic civilization. You're asking us to give up everything, he said. All the power structures, all the established hierarchies, all the systems that created this disaster in the first place, Chun finished. Yes, that's exactly what we're asking. The Council will never agree to this. It would mean the end of the Council itself. Chun nodded. I know, that's why I don't expect you to accept. You came here hoping to buy your way out of this crisis, to pay us to fix your problems while keeping your broken system intact. It won't work. She stood again. But humanity is not cruel. We won't abandon innocent people to suffer because their leaders were proud and foolish. So here's what we will do. Individual species can choose to join the Commonwealth. They must accept full membership terms, including equality principles and resource sharing. Once they join, we will help them. We will send engineers to repair systems. We will send consultants to rebuild networks. We will send teachers to train their people. But only as equals, not as servants. Torvin felt his heart sink. That will take time. The transition, the negotiations, the reorganization. We don't have time. You said yourself we have less than 30 cycles. Then your leaders have a choice to make, Chun said. They can cling to pride and watch their civilization collapse. Or they can accept change and save their people. But we will not make that choice for them. The meeting ended. The delegation returned to their ship in silence. As they prepared to depart, Torvin looked back at Earth Station 1, at the thriving human civilization that had been built in just 75 cycles. We treated them like children, he said quietly. and they grew up and left home. And now they're building a better family than we ever were. The journey back to Council Space was long. When they arrived, they found the situation had worsened. 2 more sectors had suffered complete infrastructure collapse. The death toll was in the millions now. Torvin delivered his report to an emergency council session. He presented the Commonwealth proposal. The chamber erupted in outrage. They expect us to dissolve the council? The Rixian councillor shouted. This is extortion. It's a reasonable offer, Vex said from her observer seat, and it may be our only chance. The vote was close but ultimately failed. The council would not dissolve itself. Instead, they would double down on their own repair efforts, even though Vex's analysis showed those efforts had almost no chance of success. Some species, however, made different choices. The Ven were first. After losing so many miners, they were ready for change. They voted to leave the council and join the Commonwealth. Within cycles, human engineers arrived in Ven space and began repairs. Others followed. Smaller species, younger civilizations, systems on the outer edges. One by one, they chose survival over pride. The council itself fragmented. Some species tried to maintain the old ways and found themselves isolated. Others adapted and thrived. The galaxy was reshaping itself and the old order was dying. 10 years later, Ambassador Chun stood on Earth and looked up at the stars. The crisis was over. Most of the galaxy had reorganized under Commonwealth principles. Billions had been saved. But billions had also died in the chaos and collapse. Was it worth it? Asked a young human aide. Could we have helped sooner? Chun was quiet for a long moment. If we had returned when they first asked, we would have just fixed their systems and left again. Nothing would have changed. They would have learned nothing. The cycle would have continued. Sometimes the greatest kindness is allowing people to face the consequences of their choices, she continued. Not with cruelty, but with the understanding that real change only comes from real consequences. She smiled slightly. Besides, look at what we built while we were gone. The Commonwealth is something new, something better. We didn't just survive their disrespect. We transcended it. The young aide nodded, understanding in the end, humanity had left in silence. And in their absence, the galaxy learned that the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones holding everything together, deserved respect most of all. Some species learned this lesson in time. Others did not, but the galaxy would never forget the day humanity left and everything fell apart.